Another thing. Let me leave on. If the world is not necessarily a rational place, if basically the gears or the engines of the world churn for reasons of, say, ambition, habit, greed, insecurity and fear rather than reason, we may need to look at our futures in slightly different ways. When we assume that the world is rational, that we make decisions and take steps based on best likely outcomes, well, you will also assume a certain linearity towards the future. In other words, just as the arguments for gay rights are sound, so eventually it's just a matter of time we'll get there. But what if the arguments aren't important? That ultimately ambition, political ambition, greed, habit, fear is more important than arguments. Then you're not going to get there. And that's something which I look back over 20 years and I said to myself, gee, I've seen societies fall apart. Thailand has given me some very happy memories. And that country is slowly falling apart. When I started off my career many, many years ago, I knew that I was very junior there, so I really didn't know what was going on. I was in a marketing department, and that marketing department had a lot of business deals with Iraq. We were exporting regularly, container after container to Iraq. Well, what does Iraq mean to us now, this generation? Right? It's been 20 years since Operation Desert Storm in 1991. 20 years of war. But before 1991, it was a prosperous place, importing stuff from Singapore, nice middle class, relatively liberal Arab society. But today, we have the Islamic State slaughtering non-Sunnis, not just slaughtering non-Muslims, slaughtering non-Sunnis. They are demanding female genital mutilation in the city of Mosul. So the whole countries can go backwards. So it must make you wonder, you know, what makes us so confident that eventually, it's only a matter of time, we will get 377A repealed or knocked out? What if the answer to that question is not in your lifetimes, dear? What if free speech never comes to Singapore? What if democracy never comes to Singapore? The British promised the Hong Kongers direct election for the chief executive by 2017. That's 3 years away. And I think if you ask a lot of Hong Kongers today, they'll tell you it's likely that the Beijing government is going to tear up that promise. They're not going to get direct election in 2017. So linearity, which may be the twin of rationality, will fall by the wayside the moment we too begin to doubt the world is crashing. What is my best advice to you then, as Singaporeans? Continue to fight, or just give up and emigrate? And if you look back in the early 1990s when I was first with PLU, and I think of the people that were with me, around me, many of them are no longer in Singapore. The leader of PLU at that time, his name is Joseph Loh. He has built an entire career overseas, working for the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. He's very successful there, right? And there were several others as well. Are they any less happy than I am? But those who remain? No. They may even be happier now. So maybe at an individual level, and I'll come back to this later, the best advice is forget it. Quit. Leave. Now, it's not something you might want to hear from a gay activist. We're supposed to say fight. But I'm saying that because I've also questioned the other part of it, which is why are we even treating ourselves as a bad thing? Why do I expect you to give up something which is your own happiness for the greater good? What is the greater good but the sum of the individual good? And if that were the case, why do I have to ask you to give up anything? And I'll come back to that. I'll now move on to equality. I'll jump a little bit. There's a good reason why I like volunteering at TWC2. Okay, I feel good about it, but more important than that, there's something for the mind. You see, for 20 years I had to struggle, and even right now they're still struggling. They had to get a police license for this. We had to fight for every little thing that we wanted for gay organizing, LGBT organizing. And I then acquired from that experience a relatively skeptical, sour view of the state. And one day I thought, wait a minute, is that view purely a subjective one? In other words, is my view of the Singapore state simply because I was the targeted minority? So I volunteer at TWC2 now, and I think it's been a huge learning experience, because now I'm in an area where I talk against the state in terms of migrant worker treatment over an issue in which I have no personal stake. I am not a migrant worker. I am not a low-wage migrant worker. I'm even lower than low wage. I don't earn a thing. I have no stake. My bank account doesn't depend on it. Oh God, what does it depend on? Right? And I'm not. So here I am in an organization, TWC2, coming up against the state over this and that and this and that. Do I find, in my experience with the state, that the state is reasonable after all? That so long as I have no personal stake in the matter, that civil servants are dispassionate, they are professional, and so on and so forth. And you know what the horrible thing is after 3 years? I actually have confirmed all my biases. That even when I don't have a personal stake in it, every time I deal with the state, I see exactly the same kind of rigid, unthinking, unreasonable, discompassionate behavior. And it changes my entire view of the Singapore state. And if I ask myself, like, if that really is the state of the Singapore state, is it even worth preserving? My purpose today is not to go rah-rah about you, but to ask you to please walk with me through this journey and see it for what it is. Let me give you a few concrete examples. I can get too abstract sometimes because we don't know what we are against. So you have a foreign worker who comes to Singapore, and he is not paid for 5, 6, 7 months. And as a charity organization, we try to get him his old salary. And we come up against, and many of them have good documentation that show what they are owed. And we come up against the civil service, which essentially say, arm twist the man to agreeing to 1/4 or 1/5 of what he is owed, and say, well, if you really want to fight, you go and hire your own lawyer. But then the whole question is, he's already paid such a low salary, and there's a great macroeconomic reason why his salary is so low in the first place, and then he's not been paid that low salary, and you tell him, please go and hire a $20,000 lawyer and fight that case in order to recover $5,000, which is 6 months of salary. And that's the way the state just runs. Is it not obvious to a civil servant that something is wrong when something like this happens? If it's obvious to them, isn't it obvious that the solution must be found, that the system must perform better? You just can't ask somebody to write off 6 months' worth of wages. He has worked based on the typical average worker works 14 hours a day. How would you like to do that? Work 14 hours a day for free and not be paid, despite contract promises, despite the law being in your favor. And they say, forget it, that's the best we can do for you. Or a quarter, take it or leave it. And the man comes and asks the state, the civil servant, well, at least allow me to find another job so I can continue earning and make money and feed my family. No, go back to Bangladesh. Because you finished this job, you're here only for this job, since you lost the job, since you complained, go back. They don't care. They really don't care. Another worker is injured. It takes a long while to cure an injury, sometimes broken bones just can't be fixed any faster than it takes. And he's been here for 18 months, 24 months. In the 18 months to 24 months, he has no salary, no work, even though he has actually recovered within 5 months. But because the slowness of the bureaucracy, they can't get him his compensation. So he's here for 18 months, 20 months. He's partly here because for the first 6 months, the employer delayed treatment. Yeah. The broken bone was not fixed because surgery was not allowed or not paid for by the boss. So the broken bone then sets in an angle, which is wrong. And finally, when we manage to get the employer to pay, the surgeon has to break the bone again. Break the bone again, and then to set the bone. And so that surgery, 7 months later, cost twice as much as the surgery would have cost at the beginning had he fixed it. And all this while, nobody seems to think that there's something wrong with the system that allows this kind of thing. And the man remains for 18 months, 20 months, without any income. He's actually homeless. And we have a state that doesn't really bother very much about it. So I come to this view, seeing this, that really, if we think that Singapore is such a great state, okay, just by comparison maybe with other more venal states in other places, but we really have very little to be proud of. The other day I represented TWC2, we went to this meeting organized by the Charity Council. They were trying to brainstorm something called the Charity Transparency Index. They're really spooked by a lot of cases of financial wrongdoing among charities, right? And so they were trying to make charities become more transparent about what they are doing, what their finances are, where the money goes, and so on and so forth. So we attended this meeting. We were supposed to brainstorm about trying to be more transparent with our organizations. You know the first thing they wanted us to do at the door before we walked into the meeting? Sign the Official Secrets Act. This is how Singapore works. Alright? Why? Civil servants are driven by fear. Lest somebody blogs about that meeting and reports that civil servants talk nonsense in that meeting. And this is how Singapore operates. Yes, and somebody did raise the point. Why on earth are you asking us to sign the OSA? No answer given. Inconvenient. 不方便. But you know, talking about TWC2 is not just about the state. It also begs this question of equality. You see, it's a linchpin of our argument here, gay equality. And so I spent the last 5 years thinking, what do we mean by equality? And I bet you I can pose a few simple questions for you to ask you to think about this as well. Should a Bangladeshi construction worker or should a Bangladeshi cleaner be paid the same salary as a Singapore cleaner? Yes or no? What do we mean by equality? A lot of Singaporeans will quite clearly say, no. We can discriminate between Bangladeshis and Singaporeans.